So in today's session, we're going to focus on two different areas. Firstly, exploring the importance of change and the service user's confidence in change using importance and confidence rulers. And then we will move on to look at problem solving and how we can support a service user to understand what the barriers are and how they might overcome them. So our aim is to enable you to learn how to assess importance and confidence in your consultations. And the learning outcomes, I'll let you read them, but they're about being able to support the exploration of importance and confidence and problem solving. So let's start with focusing on importance and confidence rulers. And if you haven't already looked at the video on them, I suggest you do that before you progress any further with this screencast. So how do we take that idea of importance and confidence rulers into a dietetic consultation? When are we going to need to use them? Because we don't need to use them all the time. But the times we might is if the service user seems quite reluctant to change. They might feel as if they're uncertain whether change is worthwhile. You might pick up on a lack of confidence or people feeling perhaps overwhelmed. Where do I start? And often you'll get them in long-term conditions, such as overweight, people living with overweight or obesity, or people living with diabetes. They've tried to change, they've tried to get it under control, and they've failed. And sometimes you feel as if the service user is just coming up with this whole list of reasons why they can't change. So sometimes they just feel as if they're stuck. I know I need to change. I want to get better at following this dietary recommendations. It's just not happening. So there's that kind of balance between wanting change and not being able to change, which we call ambivalence. So overall, they're not making any progress. And using importance and confidence rulers can help us to identify what's getting in the way. What are the barriers that people are facing? So how do you introduce the idea of moving on to assess importance and confidence? And it's really got to start with recognizing that there's a struggle going on, acknowledging that, reassuring your service user. And that's all going to come from the active listening skills that you've already looked at: paraphrasing, reflecting feelings, summarizing. So we might just be saying something quite simple. It sounds as if you're struggling with the idea of making changes at the moment. And quite often something as simple as that will encourage the service user to talk about the changes and talk about their struggles. It might be that you're looking at that idea of, we've looked at comparing your diet, that's spot the difference. We've identified some areas where change might help, but you're finding it difficult to know where to start. Or you might just recognize that it's all seeming a bit too much for your service user. So something like, although you recognize the need for changes in your lifestyle to manage your diabetes, you seem a bit overwhelmed and not sure what to do. Is that right? So you're checking that, or you might be offering reassurance. It's not unusual for people to struggle when they have a new diagnosis. There is a lot to take in. So with those kind of phrases, you're demonstrating empathy to your service user. You're making them feel as if they're not the only person who's ever struggled with this. This is a common struggle. It's normal. So that just makes them feel as if it's not something about them, but something about the situation they find themselves in. So how do we look at, what the problem or problems might be? And sometimes it's because the service user just hasn't recognised how important the dietary change is. And often that's because we haven't provided them with that clear understanding of the role of diet in their medical condition. So they might have celiac disease and you're saying, okay, it needs to be a really strict gluten-free diet, but they haven't really got that understanding of how gluten damages their gut. So it might be that we need to take a step back and look at our information exchange, our EPPE. Sometimes it's a lack of confidence because of the barriers that we're going to explore. There may be a whole range of barriers, and it could be because they've tried to change in the past and it just hasn't worked. So somewhere there's been some problems that haven't been solved, some barriers that haven't been identified and worked through. So we need to think about what those situations might be. So we might offer the option to explore the situation, using an importance or confidence ruler. So, I wonder if it might help to explore further what's affecting your decisions at the moment. Would that be helpful? So again, you're asking permission. Remember, consent goes all the way through. Another example, it's common for people to struggle with change, as many as have lots of other important things going on in our lives that make it difficult. I wonder if it would be helpful to discuss it further. If we consider the importance of making a dietary change at the moment for you, where 0 is not important at all, and 10 is the most important thing in your life, what number would you choose? You might come up with a 6. Is there anything that might make that closer to 10? If they come up with something like 6, I wonder why you didn't choose a lower number. Because if someone's choosing something like 6, there is a level of importance there. So they do recognise it's important, but it just hasn't become important enough to help them to make the changes. With confidence, this often comes a bit later, so we might have set a goal. They may have recognised the importance and set a goal, but they may not be confident that the goal can be achieved. So this is quite important to use at that stage. So we've set a goal, and we've agreed on this first goal is going to be. So on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0's not at all confident and 10 is totally confident, where would you put yourself in relation to meeting this goal? And again, what is the exploration of it that's going to make the difference? So if they've got, confidence is 4, is there anything? So your confidence is relatively low. You've got some confidence, but it's not high. Is there anything we can do to increase that? So what you're then doing is exploring the reason for the lack of confidence. And it may be there's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of knowledge, there are barriers, and then you can explore those further and try and help that person to make that barrier a smaller barrier or find a way around that barrier. So the whole thing with importance and confidence is about how to increase them to the point where that service user is able to make the changes. So if we look at problem solving, that most important thing is to identify what the problem is. And that needs to be quite clear and specific. So tell me more about this problem. Explore it so that you really understand it and the service user is verbalizing that and hearing it themselves. And then using your open questions to explore that further. What could you change in that situation? And it's quite important, I was thinking about this, if you say, is there anything that you can do to change? That could well say no. So try and make these questions really open. What could you do? How could you do it differently? So try and avoid that, is there anything you could do to change that? Or is there anything you could do differently? Because that could easily be a no, I don't think there is. So try and use the questions that are really going to get people thinking. If someone is completely stuck, it might be that they need more information. And this is where, as you go through your career and you get more and more experience of what patients have learned themselves and shared with you, this can be really useful. But, would it help if I shared with you some ideas of what other people do in this situation? So you're asking permission. Again, it's consent. Would they like ideas? And you might say, well, some people do this, some people do that. Do either of those feel as if they were things that you might want to consider? What appeals to you? So you're giving people ideas with permission and then getting them to think, yeah, well, I don't know if I could do that, but maybe I could do that. So you then explore that particular area a little bit further. So problem solving can be an important skill to use, particularly around implementing goals and behavior change. And with us, from a dietetic perspective, it could be about planning meals, about shopping and food purchasing, about preparation of food, different ways of cooking things to try and decrease energy intake, for example, or to make sure that you're not contaminating anything. If it's a gluten-free diet, it could be about choices and what choices might be similar but different enough to make a change. Often it's about difficult scenarios. So, when a lot of us eat very differently, if we're on holiday, maybe eat things that we would normally not have. We eat a lot extra. We may drink a lot more alcohol. There's those kinds of things on holidays and celebrations. Is it something that someone within their work environment has to entertain a lot? Or thinking through how do we navigate around those difficult situations? Sometimes it's emotional things. So sometimes it's situations, sometimes it's emotions and triggers. When people are distressed or sad or bored, do they eat more in those situations? So thinking through those can be really important. And sometimes people have others in their lives who are dead set in getting them to do things differently, or they don't have any recognition of the importance of dietary change, or it puts them under pressure. Therefore, they try and sabotage the individual's experiences and attempts to try and bring things under control. And you often find that in people who are in couples, that there are saboteurs in the house, or it's just difficult if someone's preparing food for somebody else. And sometimes it's such a habit, it's really difficult to change, or interacts with people's social, cultural, faith aspects of their lives. So something that's really difficult change and has implications beyond just choosing a different food, because it's got an emotional or cultural aspect to it. So we've got lots of different times where problem solving is going to be required. And we can really make a difference to people by helping them work through those things, so that they can actually make a change.